Before we start adding our filtering functionality, it's going to be a good idea for us to do a little bit of code organization on our homepage component. And that's just going to help keep this component from getting too long and bloated and hard to read. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this up into smaller subcomponents. And so then when we start adding more advanced functionality, then all of that functionality will be contained in smaller pieces that are easier to read and use. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new subcomponent for our listing section. So this is where all of our entry cards are. And so if you don't already have a components folder in your source directory, go ahead and create it. And then we're going to create a new file called recipe listing. And we're just going to write an exported functional component, React component. So we'll go export default function recipe listing. That's the name of our component. And we're going to pass it two props, data and error. And these are just the same as the data and error variables that we get from our Apollo query. And then we'll go ahead and do our return statement. And then we'll go and grab our listing chunk of code and pull it out. We'll just copy it in here. And the nice thing about moving this listing component to its own subcomponent is that now we can move these data error checks into the component itself. And so that's nice because right now the way that this is working is that this error message, if there were a Apollo query error, this paragraph tag would be the only thing that displays on the entire page. There wouldn't be anything else on the page, no other HTML, because this interrupts the loading of the rest of this component, which is not the best user experience. So the nice thing we can do is we can actually grab these data checks and now we can move them into this component and just run those checks there, which is where this data looping logic happens. And when that logic happens, if there is an error, instead of it replacing the entire page, it will display within the template itself. So we'll still get our logo and the page won't look broken. It will just display a more professional looking message that something went wrong. But now that we have moved these error checks into their own subcomponent, we just have to add one more check to our pager logic, because now we're not checking if the data exists anymore within this component. So we just need to check if the data exists here directly, and that will prevent an error from being thrown if data doesn't exist and it tries to look for entries or entry count, and there is no entry or entry count because there's no data. So we just add that little extra check there. And now we'll go ahead and import our recipe listing component. And then we'll just drop it down and pass it our two props, data, which is our data that we got from our Apollo query, and error, same thing. And there we go. Now we've got a nice clean recipe listing component. So now we're going to do the same thing for our search and category filter sections. So we're just going to go ahead and create new components for both of those. So we'll go search filter and category filter. Now we haven't done much with these filters yet, but we're going to, which is why moving them into their own components is going to make our code a lot cleaner, because we're going to start adding a lot of filtering code, and we don't want all of that code to be cluttering up our homepage component. So we'll just grab our search filter code, and just like before, we'll just export a new component. And this does not have any props at the moment, but it will in the future. But for now, we'll just leave that empty. And we'll have our return statement and just spit that out. And same thing with the category filter. Grab that. And now we'll go in and import those. And then we'll just drop them in. All right. And that's it. We've got our 3 new components, our recipe listing, our search filter, and our category filter. And we've really cleaned up this template. There's a lot less to have to deal with in one page, which is nice. And as we start loading more handler functions and logic, it's going to be really nice for all of our code to be broken up into smaller manageable pieces like this. So now that we've done that, we are ready to start adding our search and category filtering, which is coming up next.